long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, constant reader Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by my antiquing partner that likes it when I call him master. It's Matt Freeman. Really? You're gonna go with the snarling monster thing and not the refined European gentleman with an oddly attractive allure thing? Well, all right then. This week on the show, we are going to be chatting about the 1979 miniseries adaptation of Salem's Lot. This will mark the final episode of our Salem's Lot coverage, Matt. And I want to know right off the bat, before we get into the details, what did you think of this week's movie?
Well, I have mixed feelings about it, to be honest. This is not going to be one of those slam dunk, man, what a terrible King adaptation discussions, nor is it going to be one of those, wow, what a masterpiece discussions. It's interesting, and I think one of the more interesting things about it is they did change quite a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. Some of it I thought was smart. Some of it I didn't think was smart. And overall, I just come out of it kind of mixed, and I guess feeling like it was kind of long. Yeah,
that is true. I think when I originally kind of sat down to think about how we were going to structure this week's episode, in my mind, I had this idea that we'd like talk about the movie as a movie first, and then like break out the discussion and not talk about it as an adaptation until a certain point in the show. But I kind of realized quickly as I was kind of coalescing my thoughts on this movie that it as a movie and it as an adaptation are so wound up in all of the same stuff to me that I don't think it'd be possible for me to break those two things apart. So I think this conversation, for those of you that don't listen to our other Levels of the Tower episodes, if you're not supporting us on Patreon, this is going to be a much more free-flowing conversation than normal Kingslingers episodes. Normally, we kind of go through the plot points beat by beat, analyze the writing, analyze the story, analyze the themes. We're just going to kind of have a conversation about this movie and the things we liked and didn't like, because I'm kind of with you on this. I saw this movie a very long time ago, haven't watched it in a very long time. I was a little worried it was going to be terrible and my memories were wrong, and I was happy that it wasn't terrible. But I think the choices made in this movie expose some interesting things. Like, it's weird because some of the adaptation choices like reveal the problems I had with the book, and some of them take away the things I loved about the book, and it's all very, very interesting. This movie.
There's kind of a constant trade-off, and so I think I have everything pretty clear in my head in terms of like what was wrong and what I liked. So okay. So the first thing that I noticed. Well,
hang on.
Go ahead.
We gotta do all of our. We got to do all of our work before we get into the movie proper. Okay. Sorry, I got wound up in talking about Salem's Lot, and I forgot we have announcements and stuff to talk about.
All right, well, let's do that so we can talk about the movie.
Quick announcements. Number one, as we just talked about at Other Levels of the Tower, is our Patreon exclusive bonus podcast that we do once a month, and that week is this time of the month. This past Wednesday, available now on our Patreon, is our episode covering The Running Man. Matt, I had so much fun recording that episode. It got a little ridiculous.
It was very fun. It became very, very silly. So yes, if you want to hear me and Scott become even more silly than usual, check that out. I
think we went on a 5-minute tangent about how Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is not horny enough. I don't remember how we got there, but that did happen.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense in context, though.
I'm sure it does. Another quick announcement is just, hey, we're starting a new book next week. This, as I said, this will be our final episode covering Salem's Lot, which means next week we begin a new book. Next week we are starting Stephen King's Insomnia, the second book in our season 2. We will be reading the prologue through chapter 2 of that book. So it's time. Go get the book if you don't own it already and begin reading. And we'll see you next week to start talking about that book. It's exciting time. I love new book time, Matt.
Me too. I've been excited to read this book pretty much since we first kind of started talking about it. At some point, we're going to do that thing where I tell you what I think it's about based on the absolute paucity of information that I have available.
Yeah, I guess we have to do that at the end of this episode because you're going to start reading it any minute now. So we'll do that at the very end of this episode.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, Matt, now you can begin talking. I give you permission to begin talking about Salem's Lot.
So I watched this movie. I watched the first half of it with my parents, and as I was watching the beginning, I was kind of like face palming because I was like, surely they have no idea what's happening in this movie. Like, the only reason I can make any sense out of this is that I read the book and I know that like Ben Mears is a man returning to town after many years, and he sees the Marston house, which has this specific meaning to him. And the movie is just like, man drives into place, stops and looks at house, stares at house. Like, there's so much of it where you're just like, I really don't think that you're communicating what you think you're communicating. And having read the book, you can read between the lines, you know what they're going for, but I just don't think that it works. There's a lot like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say I disagree with you. Okay, I really liked this movie. The more I think about it, I mean, there are problems with it, and we'll get into it. I found this movie so charmingly 70s, and like, I think if I was forced to pick like my favorite decade of movies, I think 70s might be it. I just love the style of movies in the 70s. In our Running Man discussion earlier this week, you talked about how between Salem's Lot and The Running Man, you felt like you were going crazy because these are movies that felt like they were made for television and looked cheap and terrible.
Yeah.
I agreed with you on The Running Man. I didn't want to start a fight on that show. I don't agree with you on this movie. I mean, here's what I'll say. I think this movie does look cheap. It has this there's just an aesthetic to me about 70s filmmaking where it just seems, it's not that it seems cheap, it just seems rough and unpolished. Mm-hmm. And that's very much what this movie feels like to me. Like, I love how little music there is. I love that, like, most of this movie is people talking, and there's no background music to the people talking. It's just like these silent scenes where the sound mix has, like, you know, them moving around. You can hear like all these sounds that I think they remove from modern movies, where like you can hear the chairs squeak, you can hear their feet on the floor, you hear the props make loud noises. Like, it's just like all the stuff that makes it feel rough and rough around the edges. I find it so quaint and adorable. I love the moments where it cuts to commercial on freeze frames. I think that's so funny. Yeah.
Usually with some kind of jump scare.
Yeah.
No, I think that's good. Yeah, that's fun to talk about. I mean, I think that the thing that struck me as the most 70s is you know, the lead actor is, you know, Hutch, aka David Soul.
Yeah.
And he's I think he's good. Like, I never watched Starsky and Hutch. I don't really think I've seen him in anything else. And also he's like way older than I thought Ben Mears was supposed to be.
Yeah,
but
they aged him up, and they aged up Mark Petrie quite a bit as well.
And I mean, honestly, kind of seems like they just went carte blanche with the ages in general of various characters, and kind of, we'll probably talk about this later, but like mashed a few characters together here and there where it's like they're no longer even the same character. But I thought he was good. Like, he's not he's not the way I imagined Ben Mears to be. But this is one of those rare occasions where you're like, you know, this isn't how I imagine this character to behave or to look or to speak or anything really. But the actor's realization of the character on the screen is one that I accept as valid and good.
Yeah, I agree with that. I enjoyed him. He's very 70s. You're right. And just not only in his whole look, his whole deal, but just how he acts. I think it's really good. Yeah. I haven't seen Starsky and Hutch either, but like, it just like, you know, I feel like I look at him and I know what Starsky and Hutch is, even though I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed him. I think what he does very interestingly to me is kind of expose the weaknesses of the Ben character in general in the book. Because this is a character, like, it is so funny to me that his wife died a few years ago in a motorcycle accident. In this movie is treated as just like a yada yada. Like, it's a little bit of information that is given to you via the police investigation of him. And that's it. Like, there's nothing in that has to do with anything in the movie. It's just a little bit of background information. And I think that's so apt, because I think one of the complaints I had with the story itself was that I know it's his like driving force behind coming to Salem's Lot, but Ben's loss of his wife is not ever sufficiently dramatized in the book, and the movie looked at it and just said, yeah, we don't actually need it, they'll just give it a throwaway reference to it, and that's it.
Yeah. And I mean, also there's absolutely no theme of alcoholism whatsoever throughout for any of the characters,
not even Father Callahan.
Yeah, so it's just, I mean, and I can't even really complain about that because they already had a hard time keeping it under like a reasonable time,
it's like 3 hour. This is a 3 hour movie that ran over across 2 episodes. It was a miniseries that appeared on TV, 2 episodes. I guess they were about an hour and a half each is how that works. I don't know how they decide that, but yeah, probably 2 hours with commercials, I guess.
And a lot of it's already really slow and talky. So I think they're
very slow and talky. Yeah.
So like, this is another thing I was thinking about, was just the fact that like, I love the fact that the book is this slow, drawn out approach to the arrival of the vampires. Like, I love that about the book.
Mm-hmm.
I think that works great in a book. In a movie, you're just like, when are we going to get to the fireworks factory? Like you're much like, I found personally for myself, was just like way less patient with all of because like, I don't know, maybe it's the fact that I already knew the story. And so I was like, there wasn't really as much suspense for me as there was for me when I was reading the book. I don't know exactly, but I want to say that it's like a difference between film and written media, because
sure. I mean, I don't disagree with you that it feels a little slow. I think that the thing that was interesting to me, and I think this kind of returns to your early comment about you didn't think your parents would know what was going on in this story, is I feel like when we were reading the book, I feel like there was a question we had in our mind, like, did the people that read this novel the first time know they were reading a vampire story? And I feel like watching the movie, it felt like this was a movie written for a person who knew that this was a vampire movie, because it just it never felt like they played the vampires for a reveal in the movie. It was just like, okay, now they're vampires. And I mean, our characters still have moments where they like question the validity of what's happening to them, but that they spend much less time on that than they do in the book. The kind of back and forth, do we believe in this? Do we not? Yes, no, I don't know. The doubt, like Susan Norton's doubt of the whole thing is kind of just stripped away. So, I mean, I feel like everyone that was going to sit down and watch a Salem's Lot miniseries on TV in 1979 probably just knew this was a vampire movie. And I feel like they wrote it to that. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, sure. I think that's probably right. I mean, there's parts in it where, the whole going to get the sideboard trip, for maybe honestly, it could just be because I know there's a vampire in the thing, but I feel like the whole sequence is played in a way where it's like, we know that it's a vampire.
Yeah.
Like we know exactly what's in there. And
I actually loved that sequence. I loved the effect of the sideboard like slowly sliding towards the front of the truck and the back. I don't know. I thought that was really effective. Like, so the director of this movie is Tobe Hooper, who is a pretty well-known horror director. He directed the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which kind of gave him the horror bona fides forever. And I think he does a very good job with the source material here. Obviously, they didn't have a huge budget. This is made for TV. But I don't know, man. I thought like the moments that this movie wants to be really scary, I think it's really effective. I think this movie kind of does this thing where it lulls you into this false sense of security because it is so much slow talking moments, and then some big event happens and you're just like, whoa, okay. And it's kind of shit. We just shifted from the slow talking thing to the wonderful scene with the Glick boy floating out the window, which like still one of the scariest looking scenes ever. I just love that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's a few scares in there. Like, I mean, false sense of security. I like that idea because, prior to that, when you've got the Glick boys walking home, and it's like a creepy scene at night, and then, something lunges out and gets one of them. It's interesting because they change it around a lot here, where a lot of the stuff that was done by Straker is now done by Barlow. And of course, my least favorite change that they made is that Barlow is now just a monster.
I think let's get into that. Right. I think this is a good place to kind of start getting into that. I think the first thing I want to say before we get to Barlow himself, though, is I do think the movie is very intelligent in the way it combines characters, because I think one of the things it's impossible, even in a TV miniseries event, it is impossible to make Salem's Lot the way it was in the book. Like there's just not enough time for all these different characters. And so I thought it was very clever the way they kind of took things and combined them. Like you take Larry Crockett and you combine him with, I forget the name of the guy, but the guy that's cheating, having the affair with the Bonnie chick. Like, you take those two characters, you combine them together, and then boom, problem solved. We can still do this side plot with the cheating thing. But now we've got less characters. I actually don't like the decision to take away Jimmy Cody and make him Susan Norton's father. I don't like that decision.
It just kind of took away a character, for no real gain there. One of the core quartet that, you're supposed to feel things about. Also, like, man, it's possible that I was slightly distracted during parts of this because I'm like, wait a second, did Matt Burke ever come back after having a heart attack?
No.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was gonna say, like, did I blank on a huge part? No. So basically, Matt Burke's Jason Burke. Yeah, Jason Burke is I think there's a lack of parsimony there because he is this guy who Ben meets in the movie, and they have all these conversations that establish the themes. Actually, they talk about evil. I was actually kind of surprised that they had some of these conversations where they're talking about like the nature of evil and is the house evil and all this.
Sure.
But then he just disappears and he's out of the movie.
Yeah.
So you're really very narrowly following Ben, actually. In fact, this movie ends up being a movie about Ben and Mark Petrie. Mark Petrie, in fact, feels a lot like elevated to nearly like co-protagonist status because of the amount of time we spend with him.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's it. It's a result of shrinking the town, right? Mm-hmm. If you shrink 30 characters down to 10 characters, you have to elevate the ones that remain. And one of those is Matt Burke is Ben Mears. And yeah, I don't know if Ben Mears is a strong enough character to take that elevation, though. And I think that's one thing that the movie does suffer from, that like this isn't actually a movie, or it's not Salem's Lot is not a story of a man returning to his town to defeat evil. Like that's not actually what the story is about. That's the plot, but that's not the story of Salem's Lot. And I think what I see a lot in this movie is they're repeating a lot of the plot beats, and they kind of shift them around and they mess with the order a little bit. But the story of Salem's Lot is kind of almost carved out of it. I mean, there are little bits and pieces. I think you're right. The conversations about what is the nature of evil and the Marston house being this place of evil are there, but everything else is kind of just ripped out of it, and you just don't have a lot left, I think.
Right. I mean, okay, so like, for example, Weasel Craig and Crockett, they're almost comic relief. Like not fully, but like Weasel Craig is sort of a joke now.
Yeah.
So like all the and here's the thing. I'm not saying like, and that sucks necessarily, because I think that was actually a perfectly fine choice to make in a film adaptation, to simplify a lot of things and give you a sense that this is a town full of individuals. But like, look, if we're not going to do the full backstory of Weasel Craig, then it's just distracting to have like a fully fleshed out Weasel Craig who shows up like twice.
Yeah.
So it's sort of fine to do that. It's just I'm just remarking on the fact that characters who were very complex and important parts of this story, which was about the decay of this town, they're just like, they're either not in the movie or they're in the movie just as a caricature.
Yeah, definitely. And then okay, this gets us to Mr. Barlow himself, although saying Mr. in the context of this character is, so yeah, I mean, this is without a doubt the biggest change from book to movie, is that Barlow is not the Count Dracula-esque suave kind of vampire. He is much more basically the Nosferatu kind of vampire. And I just think it's a bad decision. It's a bad decision. Well, here's what I'll say. It could have worked as a decision, but I think they were so married to the plot of Salem's Lot that they didn't actually fix the issues that it creates. Like, one of the most clunky, terrible scenes in this movie is Barlow versus Callahan.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite scenes in the book, and it is one of the worst scenes in this movie. And it's because they wanted to do the scene still, but then they realized they made Barlow just a snarling monster who doesn't speak ever.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have to have Straker in the house for some reason narrating the fight.
Uh-huh.
And it just doesn't work.
And
it just doesn't work.
You don't know any of Callahan's conflict, and thus him failing the test with the cross. You're just like, oh, I guess Barlow isn't vulnerable to crosses. That's all I can conclude.
Right. And I mean, like, we've stripped the entire motivation for the encounter to begin with, right? Because in the book, the reason this is happening is because Barlow was furious at Mark Petrie for killing his man, and so he promised revenge against him. In the movie, Callahan just happens to be there. I mean, the movie kind of makes it seem like he's there specifically for Callahan. He's not even really there for Mark Petrie. It's just Callahan happens to be at the Petries because Mark saw a vampire and told his parents about it, and they called the priest to say, please tell my son he's being ridiculous. Right. I guess that's what happened. We don't actually get to see the thing that set up that event.
Yes.
It's just like we cut awkwardly to them sitting around a table talking about this.
Right. And then you're actually just like, wait, Callahan's here?
I actually stopped the movie and rewound it and said, did I miss a scene? Because, like, it just seemed so weird. I knew this was going to be the Barlow scene, and I was like, did I miss a scene setting up why this was happening? And no, I didn't. I feel like I know why they did this, and I almost can believe the instinct to be like, look, it's only 3 hours. We can't fully set up Straker as a villain and then kill Straker, and then fully set up Barlow as a villain and then kill Barlow. It's not going to work. We need to have one villain who's the real kind of emotional Darth Vader of the picture, which is going to be Straker now. Barlow is more like, a kind of rabid dog that is, after Straker is killed, you're actually just like, all right, let's wrap this up, because he was the guy you hated. And which is also true in the book. It's just that the book had two good villains, actually. They tried to make Straker carry all of that weight, and I think missed out on what could have been like a really cool, I think potentially an iconic, movie villain. Yeah. I mean, I do appreciate James Mason's Straker. I think he's good in this movie, and I liked him with the exception of the Callahan scene. I think he's good and kind of mysterious as well. I mean, he kills Mr. Norton by lifting him up and impaling him on all those horns. And like, you're like, wait, I thought he was just supposed to be like a normal human. And then he takes like an entire clip worth of gunshots before he falls over. Like, I don't know. That's just like effective mystery stuff that I'm glad the movie doesn't try to explain at all. But yeah, I mean, I Barlow, I just don't agree with the choice. I looked this up. I was curious if anyone like said why this choice was made, and the producer of the movie, which is a man named Richard Kobritz, actually did talk about it. And he said, we went back to the old German Nosferatu concept where he is the essence of evil and not anything romantic or smarmy or, the rogue-cheeked, widow-peaked Dracula. I wanted nothing suave or sexual because I just didn't think it would work. We've seen too much of it. And like, I get that, right? I get that idea. I think what it does, though, is it takes this really cool thing that Salem's Lot was, which is like modern day Dracula in small town, and just kind of makes it a ho-hum normal vampire movie. Like, I think in an effort to avoid doing the same thing that everyone else does, I feel like this just became just a vampire movie. Yeah. And it's not like it's a bad vampire movie, but it's just another vampire movie.
Yeah. I mean, I think if our Parahumans podcast and Studying Wildbow did anything for me, it was teach me that you shouldn't necessarily try to do something wildly different from what everyone else is doing. You should just do what everyone else is doing, except better.
Sure.
Which they totally could have done, like, and it's like, yeah, I mean, obviously the idea of a suave romantic vampire I mean, if it was played out in the 70s, God help us, it's played out now, but like we're going to keep doing it forever. So
yeah,
because it's an interesting trope, it's an interesting idea, and you can spin it all kinds of different ways.
Yeah.
There really was, I think, room for them to play there.
Yeah, and you allow Straker can't do all the heavy lifting of all the thematics. Like I missed Barlow's speech about Salem's Lot, the town. Like this movie is so much not about the town itself. The town is just a setting in this movie. The movie doesn't have anything to say about Salem's Lot as a place.
Yeah. You know, this is an off the cuff suggestion, which there are probably equally many, if not more, problems with this suggestion. But like, if they were struggling with like too much complexity in the story, I would have preferred that, the furniture store has been purchased by Mr. Barlow.
Mm-hmm.
There is no Straker. Mr. Barlow is here.
Yeah.
And all of the interactions are with Mr. Barlow. And unfortunately now there's no retrieving the coffin from the warehouse scene, although you could fix that easily by just having that be the first scene in the movie.
You could write your way around it.
You could write your way around that. And yes, you lose Straker, and Straker is a great character, but like you could take a lot of what was cool about Straker and just like move that over to Barlow. I mean, I admit like I can already think of some bits that wouldn't work so well, but like if you wanted to streamline some things and remove a lot of like what are basically connective tissue scenes that don't do a whole lot of work,
yeah,
that would serve you pretty well.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. And I think the movie is so clever in the ways in which it combines some characters that I fully have the confidence that they could have made that work. I do think this is a movie in which, like, and I'm going to make a weird comparison here, and I don't know why it's in my head, but the first Harry Potter movie. Have you ever seen the first Harry Potter movie?
Yes.
The first Harry Potter movie is like a slave to the book, to the point where it's just a lot of choppy scenes just lined up next to each other with no flow through the story. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that this movie suffers from a lot too, because I feel like this movie is very beholden to the story in some ways that don't make sense, because they carved out the thematic meaning of these scenes, but they leave the scenes in themselves. And I'm thinking of Ben getting beaten up by Floyd Tibbets, which doesn't matter in the context of this movie at all. It's nothing. Like, it's nothing. It just happens. It's just a scene that happens in the movie, and you're just like, oh wow, that happened. And then you just move on. And okay, sure.
He's got a little Band-Aid on his forehead for the rest of the movie after that.
Yeah. And it's just stuff like that. And that's not the only thing I'm thinking of. The other thing, the choice to kind of start the movie in Guatemala as well, when you're going to have them burn down the town before they leave anyway. Like, I just don't understand that. And I mean, this basically shows that they shifted the Susan death scene to make it the final thing he does in the movie, not the thing he does before the end. And I did not like that choice. I think it is kind of, you have to kill the woman you loved on your way to defeating the evil was like an important rite of passage for Ben in the story, and to just like pluck it out of there and move it to the end, I don't know, felt a little weird to me.
The part that felt weird to me was that when they leave the house, he's like, oh no, Susan, forgive me. And then they just leave. And I'm like, wait, does he think she's alive?
I don't know. Like,
that's confusing.
He just left her in there, not sure if she was a vampire or not. And just said, bye.
Oh, so sorry. Parenthetically, I think like my favorite shot of the movie is when Mark has been like, struck and like kind of thrown by Ben, and he's laying against the wall watching Ben hammer the stake into Nosferatu, and the lamp is swinging, and every time it swings you can see that the lesser vampires are crawling toward him out of the little crawl space thing. It's
so good. And like,
I love it.
It's so good. And the moments like that are like, Tobe Hooper is a horror genius, and this is a great movie. And that's like the frustrating feeling of watching this movie is like, I had moments like that. There are moments where like characters are looking out windows in the darkness, and like the window panes are creating crosses that are going on their faces, and just really clever stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the choice to make little Ralphie Glick go to his brother's window first. I mean, like there's two scenes at windows, creepy scenes at windows in this movie, but And I always was remembering it as the one that scared me the most was the Danny Glick at Mark Petrie's window. But no, it's actually the Ralphie Glick at Danny Glick's window scene that is the most scary in the movie to me.
Yeah.
And the movie actually kind of cheats a little bit because like we see him dead in his clothes, but when he's scratching on the window, he's wearing pajamas for some reason. And I think that was just like an aesthetic choice because it's creepier looking. And it is. Like he's this little floating boy in pajamas. I love the vampire makeup for everyone but Barlow in this movie, actually. I think it's really like they didn't do the red eyes thing. They made them like these yellow eyes, but I think it's really effective. And just the tapping on the glass noise that he does, it still creeps me out.
Yeah. So you said you didn't like the change with Susan moving that to the end.
No.
I mean, I think structurally it doesn't work, but what I do like about it is, I mean, literally just that the fact that I said when we were reading the book that I felt surprised and, you know, a little disappointed that we didn't get to see the moment where Susan and Ben have like an interaction before she's killed.
Yeah, that's fair. I like the scene. I just don't like its location in the story.
Yeah.
Like I think that scene is probably what I was thinking about when I said I was surprised that this, like I probably just was remembering the story as having that moment because it just like, as we talked about when we were reading the book, like it just feels like the obvious thing to do is to have that moment that it's not just he kills her, but like she talks to him first and he has this moment where you think he's about to be won over by her and then he kills her. Right. I think it's a great scene. I think it's really effective. It's just, it felt weird to me that we put it at the very, very end of the movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, you know, she's laying there with her eyes closed and
she just looks like herself.
She just looks like herself. And like you, for a second, you're actually confused. You're like, does Ben think that maybe this is really her? Because obviously, and then she opens her eyes and you see it's the creepy
so
eyes. And like,
it's so effective.
It's very cool. But I agree that it's kind of like I don't know. It's a shaggy mess in a lot of ways, but there's a lot to like about it. I mean, I think David Soul actually carries you through the story pretty well. Like I know I already said that he was good, but like I think he kind of makes the movie work almost single-handedly, actually.
The movie shoulders him with a pretty tough burden, right? I think it's not an easy thing to carry people through this 3-hour movie that is a lot of talking and kind of a slow roll in a very 70s sense. Like movies back then just moved slower, man. They did. I mean, I remember you talking like when you first showed the original Star Wars to your kids and just realizing that it's kind of a much slower burn of a movie. It's just the pace of film was just slower back then. And I think you feel it in this movie. And so, he has to do a lot of work to kind of carry you through it. What did you think about Mark Petrie in this movie? Because I agree that he was elevated to a protagonist basically, but I missed the Mark Petrie from the book. I just I was filling in the blank with the things I knew about him in the book, but really his defining characteristic in this movie is that he's into horror stuff. And that's it.
Yeah. So I think I come out net positive on the Mark Petrie in the movie. The actor portrays the right level of like terror and vulnerability. It's just that he's obviously like 18 years old or something.
Yeah.
So it takes it took me a minute to sort of swallow that like this was supposed to be a kid. But once I did, I was kind of okay with it. And I had to turn a little switch in my brain that was just like, this is Mark Petrie. He's like 13 or so. And then it was basically fine. But I don't know. Maybe it was a thing in the 70s where you couldn't hire young actors or maybe, I don't know. I don't know why exactly, but I think it would have worked better with a younger actor. But I thought this actor did a good job. You know, like I said, you buy his level of fear, and like this is a Mark Petrie who's actually, I think, more fearful, more like overtly fearful than the Mark in the book, and maybe, and you know, he also has a lot of the like competence because you know
he does. Yeah. I think it's interesting that the movie changed his motivation for going into the Marston house in the Susan Gets Captured section, right? Because in the book, he's going there out of a sense of supreme confidence. Like, I know there are vampires in the town now. I'm the only one that can do something about it. Here I go. In the movie, they change it to where his parents have already been killed, and his motivation for going into the house is just revenge. And that is a change to the character. I mean, it makes him seem brave. It takes away some of his competence a little bit, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
But I think, like, again, this is some of the most delightful stuff in this movie was watching the ways in which it solved problems that the novel like created in ways like one of my favorite examples of this is when his father is coming to talk to Mark Petrie, and he's like, he knows his son's upset or should be feeling upset at the death of his friends, and he's just trying to like connect with him. And then he picks up the handcuffs and goes, can you get out of these? And then Mark Petrie like, yeah, I can. Look, and you can tie me up. I can get out of that too. And I'm like, oh, I know what they're doing here. Like, you can't have this internal monologue in Mark Petrie's head when he gets tied up by Straker that explains why he's so good at getting out of knots. So you need to introduce that concept in the movie somehow, and you've got to do it. Like, how do you solve that problem? And I just thought the way of just putting it in small talk between him and his father as his father is desperately trying to reach him was just a very clever way of doing things. Yeah. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, totally. I agree. But unfortunately that reminds me of sort of a few places where I think that they missed on opportunities to sort of execute on scenes that were already very like filmic that King had written.
Sure.
That they just didn't execute because they changed too many things. Like specifically the whole bit where Mark is trying to get out of the restraints and he knows the sun is going down and he knows that he has this ticking clock, but he also knows that he has to be slow and methodical about it, because if he panics, it won't work. And, you know, but the clock is ticking, and then he barely is able to get out before Straker comes in, and then he bashes Straker on the head. And then he tries to get Susan, but then the sun has already gone down and Barlow wakes up and he has to run. Like, this is a inherently filmic sequence of events that would just have played awesome. And like the movie did almost nothing. And if I recall correctly, literally nothing, with the idea of like, the sun's going down, we have to hurry. Like, that's such a perfect natural source of tension. Mm-hmm. And the movie just was like, nah, no, we're not going to use that. And I found that a bit disappointing.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically we see him tied up, and then we see him getting out of the knots, and we're supposed to remember the conversation he had with his dad earlier. Right. And the next time we see him again, it's outside the house where Ben is there. Cause we just kind of, the ending is very accelerated, right? Like all the big events of the last half of the book occur in the same day. Like everything just happens. Like, Susan going into the house happens the same day that Barlow was killed. Yeah. So, I mean, technically Susan has not even turned into a vampire yet at the moment Barlow is killed.
Shit. You're right. Good point.
So we just left an alive woman to burn to death in that house.
But somehow she is a vampire, though.
Yes.
You know, I think a big sort of like signal of that is the difference in the scene where the police chief runs away.
Yeah.
Because like, and again, this is one of those things where I'm not like, it's not like it was awful in the movie. It's just like you too many pieces were missing. And so it's all different now. So like, you know, Ben's yelling at the cop. He's like, you know, this town's falling apart. You coward, get back here. And mm-hmm. cop gives him the gun, and he's like, he's sort of in like action hero mode. Whereas when the cop leaves in the movie, Ben's just like, you fucking coward, and like a dead voice, because he's like seen all of his friends die already. Yeah. And he's like hollowed out, and he's like, I guess like you've literally left me to probably die here. And he's like it's like a totally different emotional tenor. The like where we are in these characters' journeys is totally different. It all feels totally different. And, you know, I don't I don't mind that incredibly much. I'm just kind of pointing it out. Actually, it's funny because it's actually really hard to talk about adaptations because like a truthful, a true adaptation is basically impossible.
Yeah,
you can't port a novel to a screen. You lose all of the internality. You lose all of the maybe literally knowing the character's thoughts. You lose tons and tons of context that there's just no way to get into the movie unless you have characters say stuff that they wouldn't ever actually say in that scene, so like you literally can't adapt the movie the way the book actually was. And as it stands, I don't mind this as an adaptation. It's just like there's so many little things where you're like, man, it's just a shame that they didn't find some way to like execute on this thing, because I find like the idea of people racing the sun going down is a thing that happens multiple times in the book, actually.
Yeah.
And the fact that it happens none at all in the movie is just a thing where you're like, oh, really?
The stuff like that, I wonder if it's just budgetary, because like, having to shoot at a certain time of day fucks up your whole schedule sometimes. And they're probably most of this movie was shot on set. They probably were not on location very often at all. And so like having to do that kind of stuff just complicates the whole production more. And so they just kind of try to avoid it. But I agree with you. I mean, the most fun thing about the book to me, and the most fun thing about vampire stories in general, is that tension, about that feeling of safety during the day, and the tension that is created by the setting sun. And this movie just does not exploit that in any way. I also think like so much of the movie takes place in the daytime, like a surprising amount. Like I just like, if you're not going to do the tension of the setting sun, just set it at night. Like when they went into the Marston house, it's like broad daylight out. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, right. Like it's not even evening. It's just, it feels like it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah. And when he's digging the grave for the Glick boy, it's mid afternoon. I mean, maybe early evening if we're being optimistic. And then the kid wakes up and you're like, and I was like, the sun is glaring down into the grave. What the hell?
It's fine. Yeah. I did enjoy that scene though. I think that scene did capture what I liked about the moment in the book though. Like I love like the Mike Ryerson character is just kind of has this empty stare, and I love when he jumps down into the grave and lands on top of the coffin. Like Tobe Hooper gets this really great angle of him landing on the coffin, and you can kind of see he doesn't fully understand why he's even doing this. Like the thing is, we're missing the entire context. Like we're missing him hearing the kid and hit him like being driven insane by the idea that the kid's eyes are still open. Like none of that is there, but I think the movie manages to capture the feeling of it. Like we maybe don't understand specifically why he's doing what he's doing, but I feel like the power of the moment works.
Yeah, I agree. I thought the scene worked overall. It was literally just the time of day. That was okay. Yeah. No, I thought that was great. And then I love the makeup and the acting, especially in terms of being a transformation, because the Mike Ryerson character is this kind of, dopey guy. And then when he's the vampire, he's like you can kind of see that this actor has some chops, because he like transforms into a totally different thing.
And he's just sitting in that chair. He's just like sitting there waiting for him. Yeah. It's so effective.
This is like the one line of the movie that I loved it from the book too, but I actually just adored the execution, was when he's like, "You will sleep like the dead teacher." And I was like walking around my house going, "You will sleep like the dead teacher." I thought it was great.
It is really great. Yeah. What did you think about Susan Norton as a character? She's played by Bonnie Bedelia, who, of course, we all know as Holly Gennaro from Die Hard. This is, I think, 10 years before that, 8 years, almost a decade before she becomes John McClane's wife, ex-wife, separated wife, whatever. What'd you think of her?
I didn't feel like they brought anything new to the movie that, she's already sort of underwritten in the novel.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you have a different take? The
one big change that they did from the book is that it seems like Susan is on the cusp of getting out of Salem's Lot. Like in the movie, she takes an interview out in Boston and disappears for half the movie. And then unfortunately comes back. But I found we talked a lot about her relationship with Ben in the book, and obviously it's not as explored in the movie. And the idea that Ben really isn't that into her is not explored in the movie at all. But I love this idea. I love what they did do with it, though, because like we talked about in the book how Susan's like an example of how you can never escape from your small town. Like you can't. But I love this idea that in the movie, we don't get the idea that Ben, like one of the things that I think the movie does is it's not like, it doesn't feel to me like Ben is back temporarily. It feels like he's deciding he's going to stay here now. And when Susan gets the interview and it seems like she's going to get out of town, he's not happy about it. He's upset. He doesn't like this. Like he feels like she's leaving him. And of course he could go live in Boston if he wanted to, but he doesn't want her to leave. He wants to stay in Salem's Lot and he wants her there. And I thought that dynamic was really interesting. I don't think it's really explored because again, any new stuff they invent in the story has to like fit within the plot diagram of the book that they were so religiously adhering to. So like, I don't think that element gets explored very much, but it's definitely there.
Yeah. I mean, that stuff is definitely them looking at their script and being like, all right, like a big part of this movie is this romance between these two characters. We spend a lot of time on it and we can't help but notice that there's not a lot there. So we're going to create, number one, we're going to make it a little bit more convincing that they are into each other. We're gonna focus on their courtship in a way that feels more like a standard romance and less like this weird thing where, like I believe I said previously on the show, Ben is Susan is staring longingly at Ben and Ben is staring longingly at the Marston house.
Yeah.
There's just more to their relationship. And then, of course, you have to inject a little bit of conflict into it. Of course, interestingly, the conflict in the book was the fact that she didn't believe they were vampires. The conflict here was this kind of wholly invented thing where, maybe she's not as into him as, as he wants her to be. I don't know. I thought it was, like you said, it's interesting. It's something new. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say this is one trick that movies have actually is like just the fact that there's a human flesh and blood actress portraying Susan, and the actress is making all sorts of minor choices in terms of how she's portraying the character already makes Susan feel like more of a real person than she is on the page, So that's just a kind of an advantage movies have in some cases.
Sure. I did not like the change of why she went into the Marston house. So obviously in the book, she goes to the Marston house because of her continued complete doubt that this whole thing is real, right? In the movie, it's a really interesting series of events, right? She goes to Eva's, which I don't know about you, but Eva's boarding house did not look close to what it looked like in my head in this. It looked like a hotel, like a legitimate hotel. It looked very nice. It looked way too nice for me. Like in my head, I imagined like this kind of rundown 3-story house, and Ben is up in the attic room that's probably small and cramped, and I don't know, he's in this nice room, this nice carpeted room. It just didn't look like what I thought it was gonna look
I imagined his bedroom being like the size of my closet and him like wedged in the corner with his typewriter.
So she goes there and she like looks at his typewriter, and then she goes to the Marston house and she's just looking at it. And it's not exactly clear why she's there. But the reason she ends up going inside is because she sees Mark Petrie going in and follows him to stop him. So I don't know. I think this is one of those things where it's the thing I hate doing, where I'm saying I just didn't like it just because it was different from the book. And I hate reviewing adaptations and just saying they changed it and therefore it's bad. I don't think that's true. I preferred the setup in the book so much more. I agree. Like we've talked about this so much that she is an underwritten character, but her constant doubt was one of her more interesting character traits. And that's just been kind of carved out of this movie.
Yeah, it's true. Right. I mean, I almost would like to talk to somebody who's never read the book, but has watched the movie and just be like, hey, like, having watched the movie, could you give me a synopsis of what happens in this movie? And
Yeah, did you talk to your parents about the first half? Like, were they following?
they, one of them like fell asleep,
So no.
and then the other one seemed to be enjoying it up until we basically all had to go to bed. But I mean, you know, I think it's a movie. It's a kind of a movie of their generation, and so they actually don't mind kind of the slowness and the talkiness.
Sure.
If anything, I think they're like find it a breath of fresh air. And I think they were following it. I mean, honestly, I think it's in the latter half of the movie that most of the stuff happens where I'm like, that was a missed opportunity. I was really. I think I liked the first, you know, I broke it up basically almost exactly in half and watched it over 2 days. And I think I liked the first half more than the second half.
I think I did too.
Yeah.
I think I will agree with that. I mean, I appreciate the movie. It's smaller and there are less characters, but the movie does take time to get us to know Salem's Lot a little bit. Like, it's obviously not as much as in the story itself, but it spends some time with the characters and we get to understand them. And like, I mean, there's the moment with Larry Crockett and the cheating scene with, I forget the name of the husband, like that's in there. And that's, I mean, it leads to a vampire moment as Fred Willard as Larry Crockett goes sprinting out of the house. But it's just a scene on its own to give some flavor to the town.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's what's fascinating is like, the book, the substance of the book is these moments where we're getting to understand all these relationships that are happening in the town. And in this movie, we don't have the subtext that the story is really about the town. Mm-hmm. And thus it feels weird and sort of floaty and disconnected when you're like, what the hell? Why are we following the cheating secretary and the boss and the guy with the thing? Like, I mean, I liked it actually. It feels a little disconnected from everything else, like you said.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought the scene with the shotgun was great. Like that was so that was the one scene in the whole movie where I was like, this is exactly what I wanted. I have no notes.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
And like, man, Fred Willard as Larry Crockett, that's something I did not remember. And I love to see him. He's not doing his, like, I feel like as Fred Willard got older, he like leaned into his intonation of how he talks more, especially in the comedies he was in. So it's just kind of seeing him play a straight man is interesting.
Yeah.
Also, I loved it. I mean, we talked so much about his Jehubi's line, and it's so funny to me that like in the book, he's this creepy ass realtor that's like leering at his assistant, and in the movie, they're like, "Let's make them fuck."
Yeah. Right. And you know, combine characters again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And oh my God, she's wearing the 70s were such a different time. The night that they're having their affair, do you remember what she's wearing? It's like this. It's
like sky blue sequined. I don't know what to call it. Like some kind of bikini type garment, like but it's
teddy not type thing. But it's so 70s. It's so fucking 70s. I loved it.
I guess it is more of a teddy type thing, but the material is not something you would ever use.
No.
It's so.
I don't even know what the material is. Like, it's not silk. It's like, but it's not. I don't know. It's not like sweat material. Like, I don't know what it is. It's just wild. It just looks like this. It looks like the 70s to me. I've seen so many 70s movies that people wear stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. It was a very strange time. Yeah.
What else did you want to say about this movie?
I don't know. Man. It's hard to talk about, like you said at the top, like it's hard to talk about adaptations because I don't like to just list all of the things that were different, and I don't think that's what we've done here. I think we talked about like maybe what could have been done better to make it line up a bit better, or not even just make it line up a bit better for its own sake, but I think there were places where, you know, here's something we can say, like, okay, so this was a story that was made early in Stephen King's career as a published writer. Salem's Lot was,
Mhm.
And they made this movie relatively soon after the book came out, right?
Yeah, 4 years. This is, I mean, the second King book, second King adaptation too.
So I'm going to flip this on you and kind of turn it into a question. Do you think Stephen King, the writer, is sitting there writing his books and then watching people make movies out of them very rapidly and being like, I am getting ideas for how I can write my books to make them more adaptable? Is that something that's going on in his head? Because people just keep fucking making adaptations of his movies forever. So do you think he leans into that, or do you think he just does what you think Stephen King just does what Stephen King's going to do, and the stories just happen to be so good that people keep picking them up to adapt them?
Yeah, I think it's the latter.
Okay.
I don't think he writes for adaptations. I know, like, I love telling the story. So I don't know if do you know who Nicholas Sparks is?
No, I don't think so.
He's a romance writer. He wrote, God, what is the name of the movie that everyone thinks of? I have to look it up because I'm blanking on it now. I'm pretty sure he wrote A Walk to Remember. He wrote, what is the one The Notebook. The Notebook. He wrote the book, The Notebook.
Okay.
And obviously that was made into a movie. So one time with a girl I was dating at the time, we got tickets to go see, I forget which one it was. It was I think it was The Last Song. It doesn't matter. There was a new Nicholas Sparks based movie coming out, and Nicholas Sparks was going to be there for a Q&A after the movie. And the girl I was dating at the time really loved Nicholas Sparks and wanted to go. So we went, and someone asked him the question, like, when you write, do you write with knowledge that your books are going to be made into movies? And like, in my head at the time, I'm like, no author is ever going to say yes to that question because it makes you seem like a total sellout.
Like a shill. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was just like, oh yeah. Like I'm kind of writing the book and the movie at the same time. And I was just like, wow, I can't believe you just admitted that. So no, I mean, like even in the deepest, darkest recesses of his head, I think Stephen King writes stories because he gets an idea and has to explore what the idea means. And I mean, does he love that his books are adapted into movies? Yeah. Even the ones, like even the adaptations that aren't that good, he's still like excitedly behind. Like, I think the reason why everyone talks about his hatred of the Shining adaptation is because it's so rare that he doesn't like a movie based off his stuff. Like he loved this adaptation. He loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Was so happy with it. And it's very different, and it makes very different choices. And so no, I don't think very long answer to your question, but no, I don't think he's writing for the adaptations. I think the reason why Stephen King movies are so often adapted is because there is something universal in the ways he writes and the concepts he writes and the people he writes about that just are just, they're stories that everyone wants to hear. And so someone reads that story, and a creative reads that story and says, I need to make that. I need to put my spin on this idea. And that just continues to happen over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think you articulated that perfectly, actually. Yeah, like it's a combination of, like we've said before, sort of very evocative premises where you can describe it in a sentence or two, and then you're like, oh, I want to read that. Mm-hmm. But like what you did last night, where you described the premise of the Running Man novella, and I was like, oh, I want to read that, even though like I just watched the movie, because it's very different, actually.
Yeah.
And then combine that with the second part of what you said, which is kind of a sort of everyman character, or at the very least a character who you can step into their shoes, and yes, it's about the character and their journey, but it's there's someone who you can relate to fundamentally. I think you're right.
I think his ability to be so broadly relatable is really one of his great superpowers. And I mean, I am 150 pages into his newest book that just came out last week, Billy Summers. I'm really enjoying it. Of course, it's very good. And the remarkable thing is he's still got it. He's still fucking got it, man. This is a book about a assassin that has to hang out in a town for several weeks waiting for the opportunity to take out his mark. And he's a fascinating character, and he's still like, the man's 70 something years old and he's still writing these characters. Just like, I mean, I've been going through the last few years the process of reading all his stuff chronologically, and so I've gotten to see him how he changes over the time, but I've also gotten to see how much this book feels like a book that he wrote 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And I think it's one of the remarkable things about him that he's the way he thinks, the way he sees the world is just broadly relatable. Like, one of the things, the more we do this show and the more listeners we have, and the more I talk to the people that listen to the show and to King fans in general, the more I realize just how broad of a demographic it is. Right. It's a bunch of different kinds of people from a bunch of different walks of life, all finding something to relate to in these stories. And it's really cool. And that's why I think he's so adaptable, because, like, I mean, you think about a movie like It, Chapter 1, which is really what started this second renaissance of Stephen King adaptations. Is It Chapter 1 came out and became the highest grossing rated R movie of all time. And that basically opened Stephen King up to an entirely new generation. There are kids, Generation Z kids, who are now in love with Stephen King because they saw that movie. And that's a book that came out the same year I was born, and I'm old as shit. So I don't know. It's just, it's timeless in a way as well.
Yeah. I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of the trick. I was thinking about this a bit because we were talking about The Running Man, and also just a bit in general, because I'm sort of lately, I've been obsessed with this idea of like simple premises being the key.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it being a simple premise is like you change as little as possible. Right. It's not like the year is 3512 and the Martians are at war with the Neptunians, and like there's not a lot of baggage. It's just there's an evil demon clown terrorizing children, and the adults won't listen to them. Mm-hmm. That's my synopsis, not having really ever read the book or even really watched the movie all the way through. So like it's sort of minimal changes, and then you kind of can fill in the edges, right? And I think that's pretty crucial. Which is, it's funny because The Dark Tower is nothing like that. The Dark Tower is like endless background material, but that doesn't matter because it's the characters that are the core of it, of course.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, the cool thing, and I guess we're kind of bleeding over into our other levels of the tower conversation, but I mean, the cool thing is, over the course of really thinking about all these adaptations, you're thinking about what is a successful Stephen King adaptation and what is an unsuccessful one. And ultimately, I think this is a successful adaptation. You know, that we had problems with this movie. We talked about them, some decisions we disagreed with, but overall, I think this movie achieves its objectives. It's not as good as the book. They almost never are, but this is a successful one. And it's a successful one that adheres closer to the source material than a lot of other adaptations do. Yeah,
that's a good point. It captures a lot of the good scenes that you remember from the book. Mm-hmm. Not all of them, but that would be too much to ask, I think.
Yeah.
And it makes some really intelligent choices, and it makes a few choices where, you know, you just kind of shake your head, but ultimately it's like, well, this is another thing that I always say, like I'm always, whenever I make a suggestion, I always make it like very in a very like unattached fashion, because like, okay, maybe you make Barlow into a more fully fleshed out character, but then maybe that slows the pacing way down, because now you have a whole nother character to introduce, and it creates all these knock-on effects that make it even harder to pull things together in the end. So, hey, maybe having Barlow be a Nosferatu monster actually was the better choice in some sense. I can't really say for sure that it's not. It's just you know, you have an instinct and you can argue for it, but
yeah. I mean, I wonder, like, obviously we weren't alive in the 70s, so wonder what in the culture really made them think that it was a bad way to go originally, and we need to change it up. I don't know. Like, there are moments that I really like the Barlow the version of Barlow in this thing. I think it's an inferior choice, but we'll never see what the movie looked like differently. I mean, I guess technically we will, because Matt, there is a 2004 adaptation, another miniseries. For some reason, they keep making Salem's Lot into miniseries and not movies, but this is just a long movie. Let's be honest. But the 2004 version has Rob Lowe as Ben Mears. I've actually never seen it. And we had some folks that were disappointed we won't be covering it on the show proper. And that's just because we've got to move on. We've been on Salem's Lot for 3.5 months now. We've got to move on to the next book. But maybe we'll cover the Rob Lowe version on a future Other Levels of the Tower, because I'm kind of anxious to see what they did with this thing now.
I would like to, maybe after some time has passed.
Yeah.
It's funny because Rob Lowe is like the perfect person to play Ben Mears. Actually,
I love Rob Lowe.
Just immediately see that as the perfect fit. That's so
He's
funny.
Great. West Wing, great. Parks and Rec, great. Love you, Rob.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think that's I go ahead and send these notes to Tobe Hooper. I believe he's 78, so I'm sure he's spending most of his time reading reviews of the movie that came out.
Matt, he not live no more.
Oh, he's not?
No,
I just looked this up.
He dead.
You sure?
Dead. Yeah.
You mean he's not going to read our notes?
No, he dead.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a shame.
Yeah, I mean, how you haven't seen any of his movies, right? You never saw Texas. You're not a big horror guy, so you never saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre or any of it. I mean, did you see Poltergeist?
Yes, I love Poltergeist.
Okay, well, this gets us into the whole thing about did he direct Poltergeist, or was it really? I don't know if you know about this, but there's a whole thing about whether or not Steven Spielberg actually secretly directed Poltergeist, or Tobe Hooper did, or what the hell's going on there. It's this crazy thing that I don't fully understand, but
okay,
he's listed as the director of Poltergeist.
Well, that's interesting.
So, okay, let me give you the Cliff's Notes version.
Okay.
Spielberg was working on E.T. His contract stipulated he was not allowed to direct another movie while he was working on E.T. So he selected Tobe Hooper to come in and direct Poltergeist. But he was on set a lot. And so there's a lot of rumblings about how this was just a way to get, like, to technically not break his contract, but also to still direct the movie.
I see. That's interesting.
But I mean, there's no obviously Tobe Hooper did a lot of work on this movie. Like, I don't want to take that away from him, but it's just this weird story that's existed for as long as we've been alive, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you can sort of see. I think you can see Spielberg's fingerprints on that movie. But that doesn't mean he directed the whole thing. I think there's just a few bits of it where you're just like, yeah, that's Spielberg. You know?
Sure.
But, yeah. I just scanned through all of his movies, and that is indeed the only movie of his that I have seen. So,
all right, I can't wait to show you The Mangler.
Sounds like it's right up my alley.
I mean, that's a Stephen King short story.
Oh, sweet!
Is made into Tobe Hooper has directed 2 Stephen King stories.
Excellent.
It's we'll save that one day.
All right.
All right. So that is going to do it for Salem's Lot this week. But Matt, we promised something at the beginning of the episode, and what we promised was it's time for you to play What is Insomnia About? I'm very excited. So, okay, I will give you. You can ask me 3 questions.
Okay.
And I'll answer them, no spoilers, to the best of my ability. And then you got to tell me what you think this book is about. Okay.
Insomnia is about a writer living in a town where suddenly everyone starts to not be able to sleep.
Okay.
And it starts to drive them crazy. And they have like hallucinations and stuff.
Okay.
And then, but they're not just hallucinations. They're like real visions of things that are evil.
Okay.
And, there's
so you're not going to ask me any questions.
I can't think of what the question would be that wouldn't just be like, who's the protagonist or something, which is obviously a spoilery question.
Well, yeah, I was more thinking of like Scott reminding you of what the Dark Tower connection is.
Oh, remind me what the Dark Tower connection is the first question.
So there is a character named Patrick Danville. Okay, you remember him.
He's in there.
He is in the story. He is younger.
He's younger. He's younger, and he draws pictures. And in the Dark Tower, the pictures come true.
That
may or may not be in this. Oh, so maybe people get powers.
So okay, maybe the better way to do this is have me ask you a question.
Okay.
Outside of Patrick Danville being in both stories, do you think there are going to be any other Dark Tower connections in this thing?
Well, for some reason, I feel like there is going to be some sort of Crimson King reference or appearance or something.
Okay.
I don't remember why I think that.
Okay.
And I don't know what form it'll take, or if it'll be just like a passing reference to the Crimson King in the sort of like Yog-Sothoth rules fashion, or if it'll be like, here's the Crimson King, or if Randall Flagg shows up or something like that. I don't know any of that. That's all just like maybe. I guess here's one thing: I wouldn't be surprised to see Cantoy at some point in the book. That seems like
so. Low men are going to show up in Insomnia.
Low men are going to show up in Insomnia. It's a prediction. You can take that to the bank.
All right. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the name of the prologue chapter.
Okay.
And then I want you to make it a prediction based off that.
Okay.
The name of the prologue is called Winding the Death Watch.
It's about somebody who thinks they're going to die soon for some reason. Maybe they have a lethal illness. Where did we recently hear the phrase the Death Watch Beetle? What movie was that in? Something we've watched recently. Something about a Death Watch Beetle. And then I was like, that reminds me of that Guillermo del Toro movie about the vampire, the vampiric device that had a beetle in it. And then I went on this web of connections that sort of didn't go anywhere, just like this sentence. Yeah, I mean, okay, so I mean, my cultural understanding of what Death Watch means is just like you're sort of the countdown to your death. So if you're winding it, you're making sure that your death happens on time, basically. I mean, maybe it's a person who's suicidal. I don't know. You're just being quiet over there. You're just letting me hang myself with my own with you're just giving me the rope, however that expression goes.
I mean, look, man, here's the thing is I'm having a great time with this. And everyone who's read Insomnia is also having a great time with this. And it could be because you were spot on, and it could be because you were so wrong. But it's delightful.
That's why I just kind of keep going, because I know that either way it's fun.
Yeah. Insomnia is, oh man, I'm trying to say this without spoiling you on anything. It's a very fun book. It's very different. It's 90s King, which I know you don't have a lot of 90s King in your life quite yet, Matt. But 90s King was an interesting time. He's trying a lot of things. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. I think so. I'm not. I don't want to say anything else. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about.
Don't say anything else. I mean, the vibe I'm getting is that this is not. So I feel like we've read and focused on earlier career stuff, especially in both adaptations and in the books we've read. Mm-hmm. And so I'm missing some big sections of my knowledge of like the sorts of stuff he does. So I look forward to seeing some crazy stuff.
I will say one of my favorite protagonists in Stephen King. I don't think I put it as one of my favorite King novels, but I love this protagonist.
Cool. That's good to know. That makes me excited.
Yeah. All right. So next week, we will officially begin Stephen King's Insomnia. Like I said at the beginning of the show, we are going to be reading the prologue, which we now know is called Winding the Death Watch, all the way through chapter 2 of the book. If you want to know what the reading schedule for the next few weeks is going to be, you can always find that. It is linked in the show notes of this and every single episode of our show, which has the breakdown of every single week and the page count number. I will say the amount of pages we're going to be reading and discussing on each episode for this book are going to be a little bit higher than for Salem's Lot. This is a longer book, and just the breakdown of where the chapters ended didn't quite work out to where I could get like between 50 and 60 pages an episode, which is what I was going for. This first week, I think, is 70. Next week is going to be like 90 something. So it's going to be a little bit more intensive as far as reading goes, and which might mean our episodes are going to be a little bit longer. I hope not, but just a little bit longer. But just fair warning. But that's what's going to be. It's good. Insomnia. I can't wait.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I won't finish the reading like immediately after the podcast and then have to wait a whole week to talk about it. Hopefully it takes me more than that long to finish.
I hope so. All right, folks. So that's next week. Let's wrap this thing up, Matt.
All right. So remember, you can reach out to us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or on Twitter at kingslingerspod. And you can head on over to the subreddit, reddit.com/r/doofmedia to see what people are talking about with respect to this show, Kingslingers, or any of the other doof shows we do, including the one where we just talk about random movies. Recently, we talked about, thought that would be in my brain, but it's not.
It was just last week, Matt. I could help you, but I'm enjoying seeing you dangle here.
Yeah,
now.
no, I mean, that's kind of the timbre of this whole part of the podcast. We talked about The Lone Ranger.
Yes, there you go. You did it.
Which we liked more than we expected to.
Yes, and this week we are going to be talking about The Cure for Wellness, which is Gore Verbinski's final film. It will be the final film in our Verbinski deconstructing series. So please check that out. I have loved talking about Gore Verbinski. So I'm looking forward to wrapping it up and kind of coming to our Verbinski conclusion, as it were.
Right. That's right.
And also, hey, follow us on Instagram, because my wife is kicking ass over that Instagram. And here's what you can do, folks. Here's what you can do. My wife is going to put up a story for this episode. Whenever I cut together a clip and I give it to my wife, and she uploads it to Instagram, and then she runs a story saying new episode. I've been trying to get my wife to read a Stephen King novel basically since we met. My wife does not like scary things. So what I want you folks to do is go on the Doof Media Instagram, respond to my wife's story with, Elise, you should pick a Stephen King book that's not scary and tell her to read it. And maybe she'll just be overwhelmed with people recommending Stephen King novels. She'll actually say, Scott, all your listeners are making me wanting me to read, I don't know, The Green Mile. So I guess I'm going to go do that. Try that, folks. Let's see if we can overwhelm her to read a book.
That sounds great. I look forward to see the result of this.
Yes. And of course, if you are not already subscribed to Kingslingers, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world that there are podcasts, which is everywhere.
That's right. And if you like any of our shows and you want to support us, then please consider donating to our Patreon account at patreon.com/doofmedia. Special thanks this week to new patrons, Aaron E., Jeremiah D., Flips MCL, and Alina G. Thank you so much. Welcome. We hope you enjoy the cool stuff that we have over there on the Patreon.
Yes, so much cool stuff, especially those of you that are eligible to see the other levels of the tower. Once again, the Running Man episode. It's pretty good, folks. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah.
Of course, if you cannot afford to donate, right now or ever, that's absolutely okay. There's still tons of ways to help us out. Just listening, you're helping us out. Just doing this right now, you're helping us out. But you can, of course, share us with your friends, with other Stephen King communities, or just randomly on all your social media. You can also always help us out by leaving a rating and a review. This week's Spotlight review comes from Energy Turtle 1899, who gives us 5 stars and says, "Great analysis. If you're looking for insightful, in-depth analysis to accompany you on your path to the beam, this podcast is for you. This is a deep, deep dive. Love it."
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Energy Turtle.
Yeah. You've given me energy, Mr.
Yes,
Turtle.
All things serve the beam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone out there who has taken the time to leave us those ratings and reviews. And yeah, we didn't mention this. I've done a very bad job of responding to your emails lately. I have been reading them, but I have not been responding. So please keep them coming. Don't let my lack of response scare you away from emailing us. We still love it when we get emails from you folks. So keep sending them in. We love to see them. Keep them going. All right. I'm done talking, Matt. Are you done talking? Are we done talking?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, folks, we will see you back here next week as we begin Insomnia. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.